Hello, and welcome to today's video, where we are going to be talking about why it is totally normal on our self-love path to go through periods of time where we feel like we know less about who we are, less about what we want, less about what is true for us than we thought we knew before we started this path or at other points on the path, and why learning to accept these moments and these times and these phases that we're going to go through where we lose touch with our identity is so important, and how we can support ourselves through these times of feeling like we're losing who we are and we're losing our identity in a healthy way so that we don't have to freak out and we don't go back to something that isn't actually true for us, but that at least we know and that we have a comfort level around, and is familiar, okay? Because that can be really tempting when we are losing touch with, again, what we thought we were and who we thought we were and what we thought we were supposed to be doing and what we thought we were supposed to be growing into. And when our life just kind of sometimes implodes in our face, it can be really tempting to want to hold on to what we had and to want to go back to what we had, even though we know it doesn't work, even though we know it doesn't fit, because we don't know what else we're supposed to do. We don't know where we're headed. We don't know what else is ahead of us. And it's in that liminal space that a lot of us kind of lose sight of what's happening. And rather than allowing ourselves to mature through that space, exactly, you can feel like you're doing it wrong. Rather than allowing ourselves to go through these periods of time and allow them to grow us, we cut it off at the root, and then we just keep repeating cycles and staying in places that aren't totally right for us, and we get stuck in our lives, okay? And this is something that I think is super important to talk about a lot, because in our world today, in our culture, we are constantly being told that we are supposed to like figure out who we are, and then we're supposed to know that we're going to have some, like, I don't know, awakening moment where we know who we are and we know what our purpose is, and I know why I'm here, and I know the reason I was born. And then I just live my life in this authentic way from then on forward, right? And everything from there is going to just be smooth sailing because I know myself. And when we go through phases where it feels like what we were doing before felt right for a period of time and was working, all of a sudden stops working and stops feeling good, we can be like, oh my gosh, did I get it wrong? Was I living an inauthentic life all the way up until this point? I must have been doing something wrong if I got to this point now where what I had is crumbling, or who I thought I was is falling away. Was I doing it wrong? Or we say, okay, this thing that I thought that I had is crumbling, but I don't know what to replace it with. And this usually is the big scary part where everybody clamps down and turns around, right? Is that I know that the old thing is fading out. I know that I'm losing touch with what I thought I was and what I thought I was supposed to do and who I thought I was supposed to be, but I don't know what the replacement is. I don't know what the new thing is yet. And that must mean I'm doing something wrong. That must mean I'm failing. That must mean I'm out of alignment. That must mean I don't know what I'm doing. And therefore, I need to go back to what I was doing before. And also, even if you have like a conscious awareness that this isn't wrong or this isn't bad or this could be a good thing, our culture doesn't really give us tools for how to work through that liminal space. Our culture, in fact, really teaches us that the things that we genuinely need when we are in that liminal space, when we are in that in-between space, when we have lost touch with what we had but are not yet in where we're going, the things that we actually need, culture tells us we are not supposed to have those things. Culture tells us we are not supposed to lean on those things. Culture tells us that means, right, that the things that we need in that time are lazy, it means we're broken, it means we're not trying hard enough, and that we're being a failure by participating in those things. So not only does our culture not give us tools for working through the liminal space, it actually tells us that the tools that we need for working through that liminal space are wrong. And that's what we're going to talk about more today, is how to embrace that liminal space and how to embrace the things that we need in that liminal space, even though culture tells us that those things are bad and wrong and that we shouldn't be engaging in them, okay? So this is actually something that often brings people to my mystery school or people to my one-on-one coaching, right? Is when they're going through a phase in their life where what was working before and what they were doing before stops working and stops feeling good, but they don't know what they're supposed to head into. They don't know where they are going, and they feel lost and they feel confused and they feel like they're doing something wrong. And this is one of my favorite things to kind of work with people on, because there are some very real and some very practical tools that we can use to work through these spaces to, number one, help us figure out where we're going, to help us figure out what this new iteration of ourselves is going to be, to help support us in not just going back to what we knew and what was comfortable because we had that. And it's really fun for me as the coach, because it can be one of these times in people's lives where it feels like nothing is happening for a long time, and it feels like we're in a space where we're going backwards, or we've gone backwards, or like life isn't happening. And then all of a sudden, 6 months later, 7 months later, 8 months later, we're looking at how much people's lives have changed and how much they've grown and how much they've discovered, and all of these seeds that seemed invisible in the beginning or very small or like nothing have started to blossom, and now we're living this whole other life. And it's like, wow, it really felt like nothing was happening when in real reality so much was happening. And the other big thing about the liminal space that I think a lot of people tend to miss and not understand is that oftentimes when we are losing connection with where we thought we were headed and what we thought we were doing, and our identities are melting down and all this stuff, we are in a really good place to deconstruct the mindsets and the beliefs and the programming that we got as children and as young adults about who we are supposed to be and about what we are supposed to do. And so we are in a phase where we are not actually building yet, where we're not moving towards something yet, where we don't have a vision yet, because we need to take the time to first figure out why what we were doing before either doesn't work anymore or maybe never actually worked. It didn't feel good. And again, sometimes people come to me in this liminal space of I don't know who I am and I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing and I have no identity and I have no path and my life has fallen apart, because what they were doing before really didn't work. And they knew that it didn't work and it was painful, and they were living these lives of trying to become something, trying to be something, trying to live up to something, this parental expectation, the societal expectation, and all this. And they were struggling, and it was painful, and it was hard, and maybe they were having success to a degree in some areas, but generally speaking, it really didn't feel good. And they got to a point where they were either so exhausted that they couldn't keep going, or where the path that they were on was so built upon, foundations of sand that it fell apart. And they're like, well, what am I supposed to be doing instead? And we're not at that place yet. We're not at the place of figuring out what you're building yet. Because we first have to deconstruct the rotten foundations of the old house we had. So this, I think, is what actually makes the liminal space of I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be doing or where I'm supposed to be going the scariest, right? Is that we're going to face this period of time where we can't keep building what we had before, where we can't keep going with the mindsets and the belief systems and the conditioning that we have. And we have to first deconstruct. We have to go backwards. We have to go farther away from knowing what it is we are and what we want and what we need. Seemingly farther away. Before we're going to start to be able to see what we want and what we need and what we need to build. Do you see what I'm saying here? That a lot of the time, when we lose the identity, when we lose what we thought we had, it's because we got to a point where we could no longer sustain ourselves on our conditioning and on our programming and on the old stories and on trying to become the people we thought we were supposed to become based on what we were programmed to believe. We got to the end of that rope. We got exhausted. We got burnt out. We lost our capacity to keep doing that. Something broke, right? Someone broke up with us. We lost a job. We came across a health issue came up. Something stopped us from being able to keep going down that path. Or we really just got to a point where we couldn't do it anymore. And we need to figure out what it was we were chasing and why we were chasing that and why it didn't work and why it didn't feel good. And we need to grieve all of that programming and that conditioning and the lack of support for our true selves. And like I say, it's going to feel like we're going backwards. It's going to feel like we're making negative progress because we're not discovering things right now. We're not figuring out who we are, but we have to deprogram first. And that is what is so scary about the liminal space. It's not just the not knowing. It's the having to do the work to take apart what we thought we knew before we know what we're going to know. That is the scariest, hardest part. Okay? So that's what we're going to focus on mostly in this video today, is when it all falls apart, when you are losing touch with who and what you thought you were, when you feel like you have less of an idea of your identity, of what you want, of what you need, of what you value, of what kind of life feels right for you, often that means you are in a place where you need to deconstruct. Does this make sense? Often that means it's time to start to dig through the belief systems that you've had that have been running your life up till now, so we can take them apart and figure out which ones are not real, figure out which ones are not true to who you are, figure out which ones are keeping you going down a path that simply isn't right for you and is never going to be right for you. And bigger than that, working through the shame, blame, and guilt that has kept you on that path. Okay? So, this is the biggest thing that I want to say about when our identities start to fall apart. There's usually going to be a feeling of shame, blame, and guilt that we can't keep going. There's going to be that feeling of shame, blame, and guilt that we failed at becoming who we thought we were supposed to become. we are going to feel like we are doing something wrong because we should have been able to do X, Y, and Z. Whatever we've been fighting for, the lives that we've been trying to create for ourselves, the people we have been trying to become, that we get to a point where eventually we can't keep going with that anymore and things fall apart, we're going to have shame, blame, and guilt and believe that we failed and we did something wrong to not be able to become that person. We're going to think, I'm weak, I lack emotional capacity. We're going to think, I should have been able to do that career, and there's something wrong with me that I don't want to, or that I can't make myself, or I can't be successful at it no matter how hard I try. We're going to realize that relationship, it wasn't going to matter how much, we're going to tell ourselves, right? I should have tried harder. I should have done better. I should have been more compassionate. I failed. We were trying so hard to make the relationship work. And we're going to feel like when it falls apart, we did something wrong. We're going to feel like we weren't able to make our bodies look or transcend the way that we thought that we were supposed to. We weren't able to become whatever it is. We thought we weren't able to heal. We weren't able to look the way we think we're supposed to look, whatever. And we feel like we failed. And we feel like we are weak and we're broken and we suck because we weren't able to reach the goal, right? So whatever it is that we thought we were supposed to become in life, whatever kind of lifestyle we were trying to build for ourselves, and again, usually it's not like one thing, right? For a lot of us, it's going to be this life we were trying to build for ourselves, this person we were trying to become that has this kind of career and this kind of relationship and, the house and the 2.5 kids or the boss babe, whatever, or the I'm spiritually transcended and I've become a guru who's doing X, Y, and Z, or I've written the book, the lifestyle that we were chasing, this ideal self of emotional regulation who can be with our families all the time and never get triggered and know who we are and da-da-da-da-da. We're going to get to a breaking point. We're going to realize we can't do it. We're going to realize we've tried every trick in the book to get ourselves to be that person, to get ourselves to live that life, to get ourselves to that place. And we can't. We just keep failing. We just keep getting to this point where we break down and we shut down and all of our best laid plans fail. And rather than, for most of us, right? Rather than being able to say, maybe that's my guidance system telling me this isn't the path for me. Maybe this isn't genuine to who I am. Maybe that's not a life that I actually want, but that's the life that I have been trained to believe I'm supposed to have, or that I have to have before I'm worthy, before I'm good enough, before I'm valuable. And we are going to feel shame, blame, and guilt. We are going to feel like I failed to make that life work. I failed to make that career work. I failed to make that body happen. I failed to make that relationship happen. I failed to make that lifestyle work. And that's because I'm broken. And that is the first lie that I want you to look out for when it feels like your life is falling apart, when it feels like you are losing touch with your identity, when it feels like you're not able to become the person you want to become. Look for those thoughts that are telling you that you failed and that this is happening because you're not good enough. Because that shame, blame, and guilt is always a lie. It is always a lie. The reason you are not able to achieve the lifestyle that you want is not because you suck. It's not because you're a failure. It's not because you're not good enough. It's not because you're unworthy. It's not because you're not trying hard enough. I guarantee you. Whatever story is in your head right now that's telling you that the reason this is falling apart is because I am shitty on some level is false. Okay? So I'm wondering, have you ever experienced this? That when it feels like you can't keep going towards that thing that you want, or you just keep failing over and over and over again, and you get to that exhaustion place, or you get to that, like, I literally can't push myself anymore, or it falls apart even though you're trying as hard as you can, that you feel like you failed and like you're a failure. That's going to be the first hurdle on this path. In the coaching work that I do, this is like the main thing we work on for a lot of people for the first several sessions. Because that narrative, that is what you are supposed to be doing, that is the right way, that is the only way, can be so strong. Yes? That shame, blame, and guilt voice, that inner child self, comes up and says, the only reason this isn't working is because you are a failure. You are lost. You are bad. You did something wrong. You couldn't make this happen. That was the life you were supposed to have. And you failed. Okay. We really want to look for those voices so that we can recognize those as voices of the inner child. Okay? That is not your adult self. That is not your higher self talking to you. That is not reality talking to you. I promise you that if you take a minute to slow down and actually feel how it feels to think that thought, that is the life I was supposed to have. And I don't have it because I'm failing. And I'm not good enough. And I'm not trying hard enough. And that is the right life for me. And I'm just doing it wrong. I want you to notice how that feels in your body. And I'm gonna take a wild guess that it feels contracting, constricting. It makes you feel hunkered down, right? It doesn't feel expansive. It doesn't feel empowering. It doesn't lead to like, okay, I know what my next steps are and I know how to take them and I feel capable of that. It's going to feel overwhelming. It's going to feel confusing. It's going to feel yucky. And for many of us, we take that and we say, it feels true. I cannot tell you how many times I'm in a client session, right? Where I'm like, okay, how does that feel in your body? And someone says, it feels true. And I say, okay, what does that feel like? And they're like, yeah, like it feels like a heaviness in my chest. It feels like my gut is contracting. It feels like my head is fuzzy. And I'm like, okay, there's a big difference between a thought that feels familiar, a thought that you have thought over and over and over and over and over and over again. There's a big difference between a thought that feels familiar and a thought that feels true. Okay? So this is the second thing I want you to start to notice in yourself. Where those shame, blame, and guilt stories start. You don't have the life you are wanting or going after, and it's all falling apart, and you don't know who you are, and you don't know what you're doing because you are failing, and you suck, and you knew what you were supposed to be doing, and you just failed to do it. Okay, so that's the first thing we look out for. And then we notice how that feels. And instead of assuming that because this thought feels familiar, that it is true, we want to start to say, no, a thought that feels true is going to feel expansive and light and grounding every time. Even when we are coming up against a reality that is painful and hard to accept. Okay? I'm not saying that every true thought feels amazing, feels like, yes, this is what I want, this is how I hope reality to be. But when something is true, it's going to feel grounded and right, and 99.999% of the time, I would say 100% of the time, it's going to lead us into seeing what our next steps are. Right? So sometimes our next steps are, it is true that I just lost someone that I really love. And my next steps are grieving that. It's true that I lost them. It's true that they're not here anymore. It's true that that relationship dissolved, or it is true. And that's going to feel real. We are going to have an expansive feeling of like, yeah, it's true. I lost them. It's not what I wanted it to be. But then when we start thinking, because I suck, because I am unworthy of love, because no one will ever love me again, I'm going to be alone forever. When we start thinking all of those thoughts, it's going to feel contracting and constricting and yucky. Do you see what I'm saying? So embracing the reality that the relationship has ended can be sad, but it's going to feel grounded and true. Once we start making it mean that we're shitty, that no one's ever going to love us, that we deserve to be abandoned, that everyone is always going to abandon us, and all that stuff, that's when we're going to notice that it feels heavy and yucky and not good. So you see what I'm saying? Sometimes reality is painful, but when we are embracing the reality that actually exists, okay, this relationship is over, we then are going to be liberated into, so now it's time to just grieve that. I'm allowed to just be sad that it's over. I'm allowed to wish the person was still here. I'm allowed to feel the feelings that I have. And that's a step forward. Do you see? By embracing the truth, we're no longer stuck in trying to make them come back if they're not going to, trying to figure out what's wrong with us and how we should have been different, and doing all the mental gymnastics that don't change the situation. We can't go back. We can't go make it different. We can't change what happened. So when we're thinking all of those thoughts, it's going to feel buzzy and high, but we're not going to have any control. Do you see what I'm saying? There will be no step in that, because we can't do anything about something that's already happened. We cannot go back in time and change it. We cannot use our insight of what we know now and what we have now to make the situation different. Those are all thoughts that are going to feel yucky because they aren't in alignment with reality. Can we learn something from what we just went through? Probably. And as long as we're saying, okay, I will apply this to the future, that's going to feel empowering. When we say, I should have known this and I should have done this before, that's going to feel yucky. Because the reality is, you only know it now because of what you went through. You couldn't have done it different before. You couldn't have changed what you did. Because the only reason you know that is because you went through it. Okay? So we need to start to give ourselves that space to notice, does this thought keep me stuck? Does this thought keep me looping and looping and looping in what I did wrong, in my shame, in my guilt, and what I could have been different, what I wish I could change? Does it keep me stuck in a reality that doesn't exist? You see? All these untrue thoughts are going to feel yucky. They're going to feel heavy. And they're not going to lead to steps. They're going to keep us stuck because they are thoughts that don't align with real reality. We can't do anything with a reality that doesn't exist. Right? So the reality of I could go back and make it different doesn't exist. So all the thoughts you have about that are going to feel spirally and yucky and heavy because that doesn't exist. There's only forward. There's only grieving. There's only letting yourself be upset about it. There's only working through the challenge if that is a part of the relationship, right? If it's not totally over, if they're not totally gone, sometimes that means there are going to be steps, there are going to be phases, there are going to be things. But so long as we're in real reality, there will always be a step forward. Okay, so next thing. For most of us, when we're in that liminal space, the real thing that's going to come up when we get past the shame, blame, and guilt thoughts and we get past the thoughts that are not grounded in reality, we are then going to have to go through a period of grieving. We are going to go through a period of grieving our childhoods and how our caregivers failed us, how they expected us to be things that we are still believing we have to be in order to be worthy of love, where we were abandoned, where we were hurt, where we were harmed, where we didn't get our needs met, and where we constructed this whole version of self we thought we needed to become because of what we were not given. This is my favorite work to do with people, is to realize that the person they've been striving to become, that they now feel like they've failed to become, the life they've been trying to live that has just felt terrible the whole time, but they believed once I get there, it's going to feel amazing, right? Every step I've taken in this career has felt terrible. I'm overwhelmed, I'm stressed, I don't like it. But I know that once I get there, it's going to feel amazing. I've been trying to build this lifestyle for myself for years, and it feels like shit the whole time. But I know that once I get there, there's some magical thing is going to happen, and I'm going to love it. This is going to fulfill me. So many people have been living these lives of just feeling like shit all the time. And again, telling themselves, the only reason I'm not getting there is because I'm failing, I'm lazy, there's something wrong with me, I'm broken. And I'm, sabotaging myself. I have all these addictions, I have all these coping mechanisms, I have all this stuff that I do to get through all of this stuff that I have to do to try to build this life that feels shitty to me. And then it all falls apart. I'm not able to keep going. I get exhausted. I can't be perfect. And I failed. No. You finally got to a point where your guidance system said, no more. We cannot keep heading down this path that is not right for you. That's what happened. We cannot keep heading down this path that is not right for you. It's not right for you now, right now. It's not right for you in this way. There are elements of it maybe that are true to you, but there are too many elements of it that aren't. You're chasing a fantasy, okay? And then this is where we are going to have to start to deconstruct our childhoods and where we got these narratives that this is what I have to be and this is what I have to do in order to be safe, in order to be loved, and in order to be good enough. Because we're going to start to realize, for a lot of us, that we didn't actually want the life that we were going for because we wanted that life. Okay? This is the deconstruction phase that is so important. We didn't actually want to get that career, to live that lifestyle, to have those relationships, whatever it was. What we wanted was to feel like we were lovable, like we were going to be helped, like we were going to be secure, like we weren't going to be alone, like we were finally worthy of that love, protection, and provision that we didn't get when we were children. We're going to start to realize that we were going for what we were going for because we believed on some level that that was going to lead to the perfect safety, provision, and love that we didn't get as children. We're going to realize that what we're actually going for is that right now we feel very alone, we feel isolated, we feel unsupported, we feel like people don't care about us, we feel like we're not secure. And we feel like that is the case because we haven't achieved these things that we think once I achieve these things, I'm finally going to be loved. And that is a very painful place to live from. And that's what most of us are doing without realizing it when we are living lives where it's all struggle and all stress and it's not anything to do with what we actually want, but we feel like we have to do it and we have to become it. Otherwise, we're failures and pieces of shit. Because here's the truth. When you're genuinely going after a life that you want to live, that's true to who you are, that's actually grounded in real foundations of self-expression, the motivation to do it is coming from a completely different place. The motivation to do it is because you actually want it for yourself. Even if no one was ever going to see you, even if no one ever validated you, even if everyone around you thinks what you're doing is stupid or a waste of time or not valuable, you still want it because it's important to you. When we're really living lives that are truly coming from a genuine place, it's like the opposite. Is we're going to see people who reject us for doing what we're doing. We're going to have the experience of people thinking that what we're doing isn't important, isn't valuable. And we're going to be like, yeah, but I need to do it anyways. Because this is what matters to me. When we're living from conditioning, if other people think what we're doing is stupid, if we're not getting validation, love, and approval for what we're doing, we're just going to constantly feel like we're failing and we're doing it wrong, and we want to abandon that for a life that will get us love and acceptance and approval. Okay? Do you see what I'm saying? When we're truly living from real foundations, the rejection of others for doing what we want to do is going to be like, okay, that's awful and that sucks and I have to process through that. But at the end of the day, I'm going to keep going because this is what matters to me. And I'm willing to lose love, and I'm willing to lose support, and I'm willing to lose people understanding and validating me because this is what feels right for me. When we're living from conditioning and we're pushing ourselves into lives that are not really true to us, but that are coming from this childhood place of this is who and what I need to be so that someone will finally come and take care of me and love me and not abandon me and not leave me alone all the time, the whole thing is going to be centered around because other people are going to approve of this. This is going to make my parents happy with me. This is going to make culture happy with me. This is going to make me popular. This is going to make me good enough in the eyes of other people. Okay? And the second thing to look out for is when we're really living a life that's genuine and true to us. Even when it's hard, even when it's exhausting sometimes, even when we get to that point of burning out or maybe going too hard, there's still joy in the process. It's not all about the end goal. When we're truly living a life that is aligned with who we are and our real identity, we don't have to get to the end before it feels good. So if every step of the path feels like torture, if every step of the path takes everything inside of you to make yourself do it, if you are having to cope and numb and stimulate yourself in order to get through it, it might be based on conditioning and not who you really are. Yes, so that childhood desperation becomes the performance of the identity that we think we have to be. Exactly. Are you performing? Is there a hope that when you get there, your whole world is going to change and everything is going to be perfect? Is there a sense that I am failing and I am shitty if I don't become this? Does it feel like every step of the path is torture, but somehow when you get to the end, it's going to magically turn into an amazing life that you love? That means we're working from conditioning, generally speaking. Now again, this isn't to say that we don't live in a world right now where being our true, genuine selves is just easy and accessible to everybody. For some of us, in order to survive in the world we live in right now, we can't go after what we truly want. For some of us, where we are on the path right now is having to make compromises to survive. And so again, that's a different thing. Okay? Many of us are going to realize that a lot of the life that we're living isn't necessarily because of conditioning, but we're doing what we're doing to keep ourselves alive, to keep ourselves afloat, to keep our heads above water in a shitty system that absolutely is not set up to support everyone in living their highest destiny. Okay, so I don't want to make it sound like if there is pain on your path, that always means childhood conditioning. Because sometimes it is just, we have to do what we have to do. We're working shitty jobs because it pays the rent. And we're just trying to get through, and we're just trying to get by. And within that, again, I want to encourage you to, number one, have lots of compassion for yourself. Right? If you're living a life that's keeping your head above water and you're just doing what you need to do to keep yourself alive and it feels shitty and you have coping mechanisms and you have ways that you numb and things that you do to just get through, stop blaming and shaming yourself about that. Be nice to yourself. Maybe there are ways that you can support yourself and nourish yourself through what is shitty in better and more supportive ways. But that's going to start with no longer shaming yourself for the coping mechanisms and the numbing and the self-sabotage that comes with sometimes having to live a life that just sucks. Yeah, so there can be pain, but we don't have to suffer. So the biggest thing is, don't blame yourself. Just do not blame yourself. Don't tell yourself that you're awful and you're failing, because life is hard sometimes. And this is the thing too, right? Even when we are on a path that is right for us, that is the path we want to be walking, there are going to be lots of times where life just does not go it doesn't go our way. Right? I know that a lot of spiritual people want to say that you're always going to be supported and you're always going to get what you need and you're always going to, but that's not true sometimes. Sometimes we have to realize that there are just circumstances that are outside of our control, that are because of our very greedy, shitty systems that we live in, and it's not ideal. We're not getting our needs met. We're not supported the way we need to be supported. We don't have the physical health that would make living our dreams much easier or more accessible. We don't have access to the things that we need. So we embrace that, right? The true thought is, this is where I'm at. And then again, we look for the steps. Do I just need to grieve and be upset about that right now? Do I need to let myself off the hook where I've been putting way too much pressure on myself to be perfect in a world that's not supporting perfection? Are there things that I can do that move me towards what I want that might not be perfect? Are there steps? Okay, so that's another big thing, is really looking out for those true thoughts that lead to steps, that lead to processing what reality actually is right now, to the grieving, to the sadness, and then to moving forward. So then again, right, a lot of the time in my coaching work, we work for a very long time on, okay, why were you going for that life you were going for before? What did you think that was going to get you? And that usually leads us into realizing where we didn't get our needs met, where we were abandoned, where we made up these stories and came up with these stories in our childhood that this is what I have to do and this is what I have to be and this is what I've got to become, and that if I do, one day life is going to become perfect. They're finally going to love me. They're finally going to see me. I won't be alone anymore. And that is what needs to happen in the liminal space. When we've lost our identity, when we can't keep going, when we don't know what we want yet, but we just know that we can't keep going for that thing that we've been going for, that's when we have to say, okay, whoa, where did I learn that I'm not good enough, worthy of love, worthy of safety, worthy of provision, until I become this thing? And we then have to let go of that. And that's really hard, right? The letting go of the trying to become what we think our caregivers wanted us to become so that they would finally take care of us is very existential. It's very confronting. It's super scary. It's almost always going to make us feel like we're going to die when we're doing that work right. And that's why, again, right, that's why I do sessions. That's why I have the mystery school. That's why I tell people to go to therapy. whatever you need to do for yourself when you're in that space to help you start to deconstruct the life you've been forcing yourself to live, and to help you process the pain of not getting your needs met and not being supported and not being loved and maybe being abused or abandoned or going through all of these things that caused you to disconnect from what is true and real for you and made you go down these paths that have nothing to do with who you are and everything to do with what you think you need to be so that you won't be alone. Do that. Get that support. You don't have to do that by yourself because it is hard and it is scary. And if nothing else, right? If you can't afford anything, I have lots of free YouTube videos on my YouTube channel. I have lots of free blogs on my blog. Check out Martha Beck. So marthabeck.com. She has books. Read her Steering by Starlight. Read Finding Your Own North Star. They're rented from the library. There are lots of free resources to get you through this phase. Right? When I did the deconstruction work, I did it by myself because there wasn't anyone in my reality that knew anything about this. So it is possible, but it's very scary. And you have to have a lot of faith in yourself. You have to really develop a deep sense of self-love in order to be able to do this. Right? So this is why we then start to give ourselves compassion and curiosity. We move past that shame, blame, and guilt that says, I am not achieving that life because I suck and I'm failing. And we start to say, no, what am I feeling? What actually happened to me? What's the reality of what I have access to right now? What would I want if I felt like I was going to be loved and supported no matter what? Would I want that career? Would I want that lifestyle? If I knew I was going to be safe no matter what would I actually want? And for a lot of us, we're going to be like, well, nothing like that, right? I don't want that life at all. If I knew I was going to be safe and I knew I was going to be loved, I want this whole other thing. And then I'm like, okay. So you do know more about yourself than you thought. But then embracing that and actually going for that usually means facing being rejected, being misunderstood, being told we're doing the wrong thing, having to take steps, life being hard and confusing, not working out how we thought it was going to work out, having to kind of believe in ourselves and do things step by step by step, following what feels right for us, even when, again, the world is telling us that we're wrong and we're bad and we shouldn't be doing that, and that's not real and that doesn't matter. We're going to have to go through against all of our nervous system programs that says, well, if you stop doing this, you're never going to be safe. You're never going to be loved. You're always going to be alone if you go down that path. Right? When I first started to embrace myself, my body is sick and it's never going to look how it's supposed to look. Feeling like I had to actually accept that at first felt like I was going to die. It really felt like if I accept my body for how it is and I stop trying to fix it, I'm going to die. There is nothing scarier than that. And that's because there was so much programming and conditioning that told me you're not worthy of love until you look like this. And so I had to get to a place of being like, I'm never going to look like that. I am never going to have that body. I'm never going to have that capacity. I'm never going to have any of that. And then it was like, now I got to grieve. Now I got to be upset because there was a whole bunch of shit that happened that made me believe that. And I was really drowning in loneliness, in not having my needs met, in having been so deeply abandoned, abused, all of this stuff. And the trying to fix my body was how I was avoiding looking at all of that and how I thought I was going to fix it. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's often going to unearth, when we start to let go of that path that we were trying to live, a lot of pain. There's going to be a breakdown, a meltdown. And we're going to need to go through that. And that's, again, what culture tells us never to do. Don't let yourself be sad. Don't let yourself be angry at your caregivers. Never go into victim mode. Don't blame anyone. Take responsibility for yourself and just live your life the way you're supposed to. For a lot of us, we have to do the opposite. In order to get to a place where we are actually going to figure out what we want and what we need and the lives we want to live, we have to let that meltdown, deconstruction phase happen, which looks a lot like being upset with our caregivers, being upset with life, grieving the things that we have been blaming ourselves for that were not actually our fault, feeling our real feelings. It's a big process. And then we will start to figure out what we actually want and what is true for us, and then what is reasonable and practical for us in the reality that we live in, because we're then going to have to build it step by step by step to the degree that we can. Right? We're never going to just step into this awesome, authentic life. We're going to deconstruct. We're going to start to reconstruct. And it's just going to be steps and phases. And it's going to be oscillating back and forth between like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm letting this thing go. I'm failing. I suck. And okay, no, wait. There's something deeper here. That's not actually right for me. Oh, that was conditioning. Oh, I was really abandoned. Okay, I have to grieve that. Now I'm back in a grieving cycle. Okay, now I'm feeling a little bit stronger. And it's going to be dynamic. But we have to let ourselves actually feel what we're feeling. If the path that you've been trying to live feels like shit, and you are living on a diet of shame, blame, and guilt to get you to do it, it needs to fall apart. There needs to be a deconstruction. You need to start to feel what you actually feel. And it's going to be a process. And then you will start to figure out what you want, bit by bit by bit, based on what feels right and true for you, not what you think you need to be so that someone else will love you. Okay? So when we are doing this work, it's normal to get to a point where we're like, it all fell apart. I thought my self-love work was supposed to help me become this person I know I'm supposed to become. And for most of us, we're going to realize I was doing my self-love work to try to make myself become this person I was going to become. And by accident, by actually loving myself, I realized, oh no, that was conditioning. And so it all falls apart. So you're not doing it wrong. You're probably doing it right if it's all falling apart. You're really actually loving yourself if it's falling apart. Because that means you're no longer able to keep going down a path that was never right for you, and that was based on who you thought you had to become in order to be lovable. Do you see what I'm saying? Okay, so this is what's supposed to happen. We need to deconstruct in order to eventually reconstruct. Okay, so I hope that was helpful. I hope that was contextualizing. Do we have any questions or anything before we end? I'll just wait for a moment. Because yeah, it's a big thing. It's a big thing on the path. So you're not doing it wrong if it's all fallen apart. It probably means you're doing it right. It means you're probably starting to actually listen to yourself. And your real feelings are coming up. So shame, blame, and guilt are always lies. What are you actually feeling? Are you angry? Are you sad? Were you forced to do things that weren't good for you? Are you forcing yourself to live a life that does not feel right for you because you're hoping to get that love that you never got? Then we need to grieve that. Then we can start to move into what you actually want and into your adult perspective and all of that work, right? That's why, again, the mystery school is 5 years long, because this is a big process. Okay? Okay. So thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. As always, I appreciate you. You're doing good enough, one step at a time. And I'll see you in the next video, okay? Have a good week, day, month, whenever I see you.